Miss Liz here again. Today we're making Irish soda bread, which is called that because the main leavening agent in this is baking soda and baking powder. We're gonna use a pretty large quantity of those to give this a really nice rise. Has a really nice crisp outside, really great to be paired with soup. You can also slice it off and use it for sandwiches, but it's really good as like a dunking bread for soups. So to start with, we're gonna mix all of our dry ingredients first. So we're gonna do 4 cups of flour. Remember when you are measuring flour to make sure that you are keeping it light and fluffy. Do not pack or press your flour. Give it nice, light, gentle scoops as you're measuring. So we're gonna do 4 cups. I have a ½ cup scoop here, so we're gonna do quite a bit, but 4 cups. 2 1/2, 3 1/2, and 4. Just like that. So 4 cups of flour. Then we're gonna do 4 tablespoons of sugar, which is also 1/4 of a cup. So you can either measure 4 tablespoons or you can just use a 1/4 scoop for the sugar. Okay, so I've got my flour and my sugar. We need 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So I have 4 cups of flour, 4 tablespoons of sugar, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And then we're gonna do baking powder. Now baking powder is baking soda with cream of tartar mixed in, which helps give some chewiness. It also helps prevent breads from drying out. So that's the main difference, but you can use quite a bit more of baking powder in something because it has that cream of tartar to help balance out the acidity in it. So we're gonna do 1 tablespoon of baking powder. So I'm gonna use a ½ teaspoon measurement here. So I'm gonna, 3 teaspoons equals a tablespoon. So just like that. So those are good conversions to know. 4 tablespoons equals 1/4 of a cup, and 3 teaspoons equals a tablespoon. Okay, so if you don't have one of those measuring tools on hand, it's good to know how much of another type of measurement you can use in its place. All right, so we're gonna do ½ a teaspoon now of salt. Just like that. Okay, getting all of these dry ingredients all mixed together. So we've got flour, sugar, baking soda, baking powder, and salt, all mixed in nice and fluffy. Okay. All right, now we're gonna add ½ of a cup of margarine. You can use margarine or butter interchangeably most of the time. In this, it's the same thing. You can use butter instead. I like to use margarine in this bread because it has more oil in it. So it has a higher melting point, which means that the texture of this is going to get nice and crisp on the outside, but still stay really fluffy. Sometimes when you use butter in something like this, you get more of a flaky kind of consistency instead of quite as much fluffiness. So I like to use margarine, but you can definitely use butter instead. So ½ a cup soft, ½ a cup is 1 stick of butter or margarine. So nice and soft, so it's easy to kind of smash up and turn into kind of a crumbly texture in here with the flour. Okay, so we're just getting kind of a nice crumbly consistency. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a well in the center of the bowl here. And we're gonna pour in our buttermilk. Now, if you don't have buttermilk on hand, you can sour milk and use that in place of buttermilk. And if you don't use regular milk, you can use a milk alternative. If you use soy or rice milk or something in your home, you can use that in its place. If you don't have buttermilk and you need to sour some milk, take just under a cup of milk and add a tablespoon of either vinegar or lemon juice. Let that sit for a few minutes so that the milk can kind of sour, and then you can use it in place of buttermilk. So that's what I've done here. 1 cup. And then before I stir this, I'm gonna add my egg. So I have all of that liquid in the center of my bowl, kind of like a little pond. I'm gonna crack that egg right down in there, just like that. And then I'm gonna break the egg up in the milk, break the yolk, and then I'm gonna use my spoon and I'm going to push the outside walls of flour into the center of that well of liquid. I like to rotate my bowl because I think that that makes it easier to gently mix it in. And just keep going around. Even after you've done all of the sides, just keep going because we're gently incorporating all of that liquid into the flour mixture until all of the liquid has been absorbed and we start to get kind of a pasty, crumbly consistency. That's what we're looking for. So just keep going. You might notice some little pools of milk at the bottom. Just keep going around, pulling it together until you get a nice peely, crumbly consistency. Just like when we make biscuits, we want to be very careful not to overhandle this because it will become tough. So we want to mix just until incorporated and then stop. So I'll show you what I've got here. You can see it's kind of peely, but it's nice and damp. There might be a few pockets of flour, that's okay. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna put this out onto the counter with some flour. And we're just very gently going to fold this a couple times until it's all pulled together into a ball, okay? Before I pour it out onto the counter, I'm gonna use my hand. I'm gonna put a little bit of flour on my hand and I'm gonna just kind of compress this into a unit so that it's not just a pile of crumbs on the counter. A little bit sticky and that's okay. So we'll just pour that out onto that floured spot. Just like that. And then we're gonna use our hands and just kind of compress it into a pile. A little bit sticky, not a big deal. What we can do is grab a little bit more flour to sprinkle on the top. Just like that. Pull off those extra pieces if you have some that get stuck to you. That's okay too, okay? But once we get it to where it's a little bit more manageable, you can dust a little more flour onto the top if you need. We don't want to over flour it because we don't want to dry it out, but we do need it to be able to be handled. So I'm just kind of compressing it into a nice little pile, and then I'm gonna very gently take one end and fold it over and then push it down, okay? I'm gonna do that just a couple times until it's all pulled together so I don't overhandle it. If you have chunks of butter or margarine in there still, that's okay. When those melt down, those will just be some nice crisp, flaky spots in our bread. That's okay. Okay. All right, so we have it all nice and pulled together instead of being a crumbly mess. Kind of pulls together into a nice ball. You can see there's still quite a bit of cracks. That's okay, just like that. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna very gently shape it into a ball. We wanna make sure that it keeps that ball shape. If it starts to ooze down, it needs a little bit more flour, okay? I'm gonna take that ball, just like that, and I'm gonna place it on my baking pan. I'm using a piece of parchment paper so I don't have to use excess grease underneath. Extra grease, like cooking spray underneath, will make the bottom get quite a bit more crisp than the rest of it, so I prefer to use parchment paper. You can use cooking spray if you don't have parchment paper on hand, that's okay, all right? So we've got our nice little ball here. My oven is on at 375. I'm gonna grab a knife. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut an X in the top. So I'm gonna cut across this direction, and then I'm gonna cut across this direction, just to make an X in the top of the loaf, and then as it bakes, that X is going to open up just a little. The last thing we're gonna do before we put it into the oven is I have 1/4 of a cup of butter, 1/4 of a cup of buttermilk. And I'm just very gently, you can either brush this on or you can pour it right on the top here, just a little. That's gonna give us a nice golden top as it bakes up. I'll put a little bit more on every like 10 minutes or so, just to give some nice richness on the top of the loaf. So I'm gonna take this into the oven. And I'm gonna set the timer for 30 minutes. This typically will take 45 minutes, 50 minutes. I always check it at 30 minutes though, because sometimes if the loaf is a little smaller or it's a little bit shorter and wider, it will cook a little bit more quickly and I don't want it to be overbaked. So check it at 30 minutes. We want to make sure it doesn't look doughy inside of that X that we've cut in the top. And it should look really crisp and golden along those top edges, okay? So 375, check it around 30 minutes to make sure it's not getting too dark. Usually 45 to 50 minutes and it should be finished, okay? Feel free to send me a message if you have any questions, post in the classroom if you have something to comment or share. And I hope your bread turns out great and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.